So firstly, effect of transition of scheme matters from High Court to NCLT. At the very beginning, since a very long time, since its inception, the jurisdiction of the High Court for mergers has always been there. But after inception of NCLT, in order to ease the burden of the Honorable High Courts, company matters, including winding up matters, as well as amalgamation matters, were transferred to NCLT. So practicing professionals other than advocates got opportunity to pursue career at NCLT. Precipe for transferred matter for listing of cases was required to be given. No dispensation of meetings of shareholders from December 2016 to January 2019. Earlier, it was mandatory to hold shareholders meetings even if there were 2 shareholders in a company for approval of a scheme of amalgamation. So this changed. The first dispensation was granted to us on 11th March 2019 in the matter of Malti Securities Private Limited. In case somebody needs the order, we have the order as well. Thereafter, the Honorable Appellate Tribunal adjudged that dispensation of meetings in the matter of DLF Limited, it is the prerogative, and the NCLT has the powers to grant dispensation for convening the meetings of shareholders as well as creditors. Thereafter, amalgamation cannot be stopped if nothing contrary to law is established. So this was ruled in the case of Idea Cellular Limited, Ahmedabad bench. So mergers and amalgamations under section 230, 232. Stages of the amalgamation demerger process. Firstly, prerequisite to decide whether the case is fit for amalgamation and or demerger. Secondly, estimation of cost involved in the process. 3, arranging for prerequisites required for filing application with NCLT. 4, filing of first motion application with NCLT. 5, course of action after filing of first motion application with NCLT. 6, course of action after passing of first motion order by NCLT. 7, filing of petition with NCLT second motion. 8, hearing of petition. 9, course of action after sanction of scheme. So first, prerequisites to decide whether the case is fit for amalgamation and or demerger. So firstly, we need to understand the necessity and objective of the merger or demerger as to what exactly we want to achieve and what would be the benefits in case a merger is being contemplated. It could be synergies, it could be consolidation of resources, it could be simplification of corporate structure. So financial statements and annual returns need to be scrutinized. We need to see whether there are immovable assets because it may have implications of stamp duty. Details of cross-holding and reduction of share capital. So it is well known that a company cannot hold its own shares. So if there is a cross-holding, the same will have to be cancelled. So income tax provisions with respect to demergers to be considered. Swap ratio or the exchange ratio in case of an amalgamation based on valuation. Goodwill, capital reserve, what would be the effect of goodwill or capital reserve? Thereafter, details of pending litigations between the company and shareholders and or company and its creditors. For any merger to go through smoothly, as repetitive litigations and disputes can prolong the merger or demerger, and there have been cases where such a long delay has resulted in the company withdrawing the application filed for merger. So thereafter, qualifications, if any, in the auditor's report, because there have been cases where the NCLT has said that you need to go for compounding of offense and thereafter the scheme will be allowed. But then after arguments, it said, okay, you file an undertaking, we will allow the scheme, but thereafter you will have to apply for compounding of offenses. Thereafter, jurisdiction of the company across states. So if we have companies having registered offices in various states, separate applications will have to be filed before jurisdictional NCLTs in order to obtain sanction of the scheme. So every NCLT will pass separate orders. Statutory compliances and records. All of this updation pertaining to statutory compliances and records is most important, as the auditor appointed by the official liquidator would be scrutinizing these records as far as the transferor company is concerned. As far as the transferee company is concerned, we will have to submit quite a bit of information with the regulatory authorities from time to time. So sectoral regulators, we need to identify the sectoral regulators who would be affected by this amalgamation. For example, take a beer company, a company manufacturing or producing wine. So NCLT said in one matter that you need to give notice to the Central Excise Department because they would be the sectoral regulator as far as you are concerned. So it depends on the business activities of the company, the sectors it is present. So accordingly, the sectoral regulators need to be identified in advance, including say for real estate sector, it is RERA. We need to serve notices in case the company is registered with RBI, or if it is an NBFC, then RBI comes into picture. Similarly, if the company is a finance company, RBI comes into picture. And if there is any other sectoral regulator which is applicable, all of those need to be identified well in advance. So provisional financial statements. Along with the audited financial statements, we also need to attach provisional financial statements made not beyond 3 months from filing the application. So thereafter, defining undertaking statements and statements of assets and liabilities in case of demerger. So undertaking, in case of a demerger, separate undertakings have to be defined. So when undertakings are defined, say for example, a company has got real estate investments and business of chemicals. So it wanted to actually hive off its chemical division into another company so that all the chemical business undertaking is taken care of by one company itself. So the company was classified into two undertakings. One is the real estate undertaking and the other one was the chemical undertaking, which is being demerged into a separate company so that the real estate undertaking remains separate and the chemical division remains separate in the other company. Yeah, estimation of cost involved in the process, cost and fees. The statutory fees paid through Bharat Kosh, fees for filing first motion application with NCLT, auditor's fees, that is the auditor appointed by the official liquidator, advertisement cost, professional fees for valuation report, chairman and scrutinizer fees in case meetings are held, payment of cost to regional director and official liquidator if ordered, stamp duty on transfer of assets of the company, other incidental expenses like printing, stationery, etc., professional fees. So this is a cost calculation sheet. Whenever we are contemplating any merger, this is a sheet which we need to work upon well in advance so as to understand and communicate to the client as to what could be the probable cost factor involved in the entire process. So it starts with professional fees, then professional fees to registered valuer. Third, first motion application to NCLT, the filing fees is 5,000 rupees. So it is always advised to file a joint application irrespective of the number of companies. Otherwise, you will keep on paying 5,000 rupees per company for every company you are trying to merge. And it will also increase the paperwork, multiplicity of documents, etc. So a joint application is the best preferred option. However, in case of demerger, it is suggested to file a separate application. So auditor's fees for transferor companies only, average of last 5 years. During the course of the hearing, the bench always puts a question, what is the average fees of the last 5 years of the transferor companies, because the same has to be incorporated in the order as the fees of the auditor for carrying out this assignment to assist the official liquidator in filing his report before the NCLT. So the average of last year 5 years fees needs to be calculated and kept ready well in advance. The total should not exceed 2 lakhs. Say for example, your average auditor's fee is amounting to say 5 lakh rupees, but the total is, it is 5 lakh rupees, but the maximum permissible is 2 lakhs. So if you tell the bench that it is in excess of 2 lakhs, but we are fixing it as 2 lakh rupees, so the same is accepted. So the average of each and every company has to be calculated. Say for example, there are 4 companies. So 25,000 rupees is the average fees of the first company, 30,000 for the second company, 50,000 for the third company, and 75,000 for the fourth company. So the total fees would be the total of all these figures, that is 25,000 plus 30,000 plus 50,000, which is 1,05,000 and 75,000. So total is 1,80,000. So in case you are exceeding 2 lakh rupees, after adding all the companies, then the maximum fees will be fixed at 2 lakh rupees only. But in case you don't tell this to the bench, you will say average fees 4 lakhs, then they will fix the fees as 4 lakh rupees as well. It has happened, but we should always be aware that maximum fees payable in such cases is 2 lakh rupees only, irrespective of the average audit fees if it is higher than rupees 2 lakhs. So the advertisement cost amounts to 25,000 to 40,000 rupees. In case a meeting is ordered of the shareholders or creditors, the advertisement will be higher. Thereafter, payment to RD as per the direction of NCLT if ordered. Nowadays, cost is not being ordered to the RD as well as the official liquidator. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a cost factor involved, 25,000 rupees per company as far as RD was concerned, and official liquidator 25,000 for every transferor company. But presently it is not being ordered. So if it is ordered, then the same has to be paid. So we need to take this into consideration. Stamp duty. So this stamp duty is a factor where immovable properties are involved, or there is a component as per the Indian Stamp Act, as per the Bombay Stamp Act, which needs to be calculated well in advance. So it would depend on the allotment of shares or the value of property transferred. So there is a formula. According to that, the stamp duty has to be ascertained. Chairman and scrutinizer fees in case meetings are held. So that is as per the NCLT direction. So if meetings are held, then mostly NCLT appoints a chairman, a scrutinizer, and the fees is also fixed as per their orders. Thereafter, incidental charges like printing, notary, franking, stationery, conveyance, etc., that would form a component of the cost. So thereafter, prerequisites for filing an application to NCLT. So your quotation is approved, the cost is approved by the client, you proceed to file for the first stage application. So what are the prerequisites? Preparing checklist, drafting scheme of amalgamation or demerger, conducting board meetings, appointment of registered valuer for finalizing the swap ratio, consent of creditors and shareholders if it can be made available. In case of Mumbai NCLT, if you furnish consent of shareholders on affidavit, then the meetings of shareholders are dispensed with. As far as creditors are concerned, it has been held in several judgments that this merger is not an arrangement between the creditors. So a notice will be served to creditors that in case they have any objection, they are free to approach the tribunal in case they have any objections. So NOC of creditors is not needed. However, if the number of creditors is small and it is easy to obtain their NOC, then the same can be attached with the application itself. Thereafter, auditor's certificate for accounting treatment under section 133 with UDIN, authority to professional to file first motion application and appear before NCLT. So this is our authority to file the application and appear. Preparation and submission of application to NCLT. So we will just see how a application looks like. We will just see this application. Yeah, there is this, yeah, can we go to page 6? Yeah, this is the notice of admission, which is a very important attachment forming a part of the application. There are no secured creditors, there are no unsecured creditors. Name of the person signing, so notice of admission. Thereafter, application in form NCLT1, which is on page number 9. So this is the application in NCLT1, which has to be filed. It contains various details, objects of the company, registered office details, capital structure, etc. So nature of the business of the other company, transferor company, transferee company. Thereafter, the scheme of amalgamation, page number 184 or page 184, please. Yeah, the scheme of amalgamation, which is mandatory. So it contains various aspects pertaining to the said merger. What is the objective and why this merger is being done? What would be the effect of existing contracts, licenses? What would be the effective date? Government authorities, record date. All assets and liabilities will be transferred to the transferee company. Employees would be transferred. What will happen to the share capital? What about allotment of shares, transfer and vesting of undertaking? Contracts, bonds, arrangements, legal proceedings. Yes. Yeah, thereafter, provisional financial statements need to be attached, which are in this format. These need to be signed by 2 directors. Auditor signature is not mandatory. Annexures are also not mandatory. So only the balance sheet and profit and loss account page needs to be attached to this first motion application. Yes, we can come back to the PPT. Yes. So a joint or separate application in form NCLT 1. So joint application is always preferred in case of a merger as it reduces cost and duplication. Synopsis in paragraph form, list of dates and events to be separately filed, NCLT checklist, notice of admission in form NCLT 2, board resolutions passed by each company, scheme of amalgamation arrangement, latest audited financial statements, provisional financial statements, which we just saw. NCLT president has powers to consolidate applications of different jurisdictions. Friends, what happens? We have companies which are present in different states. For example, there was a case where the transferee company was in Mumbai. The transferor company, one of them was in Delhi, one of them was in Chennai, and one of them was in Kolkata. So in case if we want to merge these companies, separate applications have to be filed with all the 4 NCLTs. And when all the 4 of them grant approval, only then the merger would be sanctioned. And shifting of registered offices to one state would not be the feasible option. It is time consuming, costly, and not so practical. So there is this judgment passed by the principal bench. The principal bench has the powers to consolidate petitions filed in different jurisdictions to one jurisdiction. So under Rule 16D of NCLT rules, a prayer was made for transferring 2 petitions pending before the Mumbai and Delhi benches to Ahmedabad bench. So the transferor companies were located at Mumbai and Delhi. Transferee company was at Ahmedabad. So to simplify the process, what they did was they filed applications before Mumbai bench, Delhi bench, and the Ahmedabad bench. All of them were numbered separately. You have to file them first. All of them were filed. And thereafter, this application was moved before the principal bench, requesting that the petitions filed, the application filed in Mumbai and Delhi be transferred to the Ahmedabad bench. So this order was passed by which the NCLT under Rule 16D, the principal bench, it was directed that CAAA 1090 of 2018 pending before Mumbai bench of NCLT and CAAA 162 PB pending before NCLT New Delhi be transferred to Ahmedabad bench. We direct that those petitions be heard with CACA 1113 Ahmedabad. The parties through their counsel are directed to appear before the Ahmedabad bench on 29 November. The benches of NCLT, New Delhi and Mumbai are directed to transfer all the files concerning the aforesaid cases to Ahmedabad at the earliest, preferably within the period of 7 days. List this matter on 29 November 2018. So this is a very useful option if you have companies spread across various jurisdictions. You can always file in those jurisdictions and request them to request the Honorable Principal Bench to pass orders to consolidate these files to the jurisdiction of the transferee company. So stage 4, filing of application with NCLT. Valuation report for swap ratio need not be attached with the application. List of directors, shareholders and creditors. Consent of affidavit from shareholders and creditors. Updated memorandum and articles of association. Friends, this is very important. What happens when we get cases, we get the old memorandum and articles because everything is on scan, which is updated, but the hard copies, unfortunately, sometimes the authorized capital has been increased several times over a number of years. So generally we get memorandum and articles having 1 lakh authorized capital, whereas the authorized capital presently in excess of 1 crore of rupees, it has been increased 4 or 5 times in the last several years. So before filing, we need to ensure that the memorandum and articles needs to be updated. If there is a name change, it has to be, the certificate has to be attached along with the original certificate of incorporation. In case the objects have been altered, the approval from ROC, that is a certificate, that has to be attached. So the memorandum and articles needs to be complete in all respects. If there has been a merger earlier, then the scheme has to be attached. So memorandum and articles needs to be updated. That is most important. Thereafter, certificate of accounting treatment issued by auditors. That is under 133. Single side printing on standard legal paper and restriction up to 300 pages per volume. If it exceeds 300 pages, then volume number 2 comes into picture. Margins, top, bottom 4 centimeters, right 2.5 centimeters, left 5 centimeters, and double line spacing. So this is a standard protocol. We need to ensure that we comply with this, failing which there may be office objections. The application will not be numbered and we will have to replace this. So it will cause a lot of hardship. Thereafter, signature / initials on each and every page. 3 copies in paper book form, that is brown files, 1 original and 2 photocopies duly stitched in green thread. Affidavit verifying application and memorandum of appearance. Covering letter with office copy, 2 copies of Bharat Kosh payment receipt. So this is a standard practice when before the pandemic, all of this was to be complied with. Nowadays, all these have to be complied, but everything happens online. Hard copies are not being submitted, but it is possible that after normalcy resumes, we will have to submit the hard copies with them, and all of them should be compliant with the criteria laid down by NCLT. A course of action after filing of application with NCLT. So your application has been filed. Thereafter, you need to follow up with the registry for removal of office objections. What are office objections? There may be some signature which is missing. The non-judicial stamp paper is not attached. The memorandum of appearance doesn't contain the court fee stamp. It doesn't contain the details of the practicing professional, his membership number or enrollment number. The pages may not be clear. There may be some document which is not in English, so a translation needs to be attached. So there can be a host of office objections which we need to follow up and ensure that they are removed. Once they are removed, thereafter the application or the petition will be numbered. So office objections, if any, and the numbering of the application accompanied with details of courtroom allocation after about 2 working days. So if all office objections are removed, then the application is numbered and a courtroom is allocated, before which the matter will come up for hearing. During ordinary course, each and every application or petition which is filed, if it is defect free, it comes up for hearing within 7 days. So check the cause list of all the courts on a daily basis for the date of first hearing. The date of first hearing is not available from the registry. You will have to keep on checking the cause list, and you will have to find out that yes, at night you will come to know next day morning the matter is listed before this court and this has to be taken forward. So the first date of hearing is not available from the NCLT registry. We will have to keep on checking the cause list, else there is a chance that we may miss out and the matter would have been adjourned since nobody would be present to press the petition or application. So preparation for hearing, proper attire, blazer preferably black or dark blue, and tie for men and blazer with any sober attire for women. Fact sheet, summary of the case to be kept handy with page numbers. This is the most important document to be carried for the hearing. Can we have a look, please? Yes, so transferor company, transferee company. So we have various details: date of incorporation, authorized capital, paid up capital, turnover, what is the main business activity. Thereafter, number of shareholders, number of directors, number of secured creditors, number of unsecured creditors, net worth, ratio of exchange, appointed date. So these are the basic parameters. Most of the questions which fall from the bench are covered in this fact sheet. Along with this, we can always mention the page numbers. There are these 2 blocks alongside which say page number. So you can always fill the page number in case the bench asks you what is the date of incorporation of the transferee company. So instead of turning pages again and again, we can straight away say, sir, it is this. And it is a very strong signal if we give copies of the fact sheet to the bench when the matter is called out for hearing. As soon as the matter is called out along with the minutes of order, once this fact sheet is given to them along with the page numbers, they will obviously feel that you are completely prepared, fully prepared, and most of the questions will not be asked because everything is there in front of them. So they try to test people as to how much they are prepared, what is the level of preparedness. So this fact sheet will help a lot. So thereafter, preparation of minutes of order. In Mumbai, there is this practice that the order also has to be prepared by the petitioner company. The representative has to tender the same during the time of hearing, because generally they make changes in that order. Soft copies have to be carried in pen drive, and based on the minutes of order, they allow the application. So the minutes of order should contain the SIN of the company, PAN and ward number of income tax, appointed date, business of the company, rationale, etc. Contents of minutes differ from courtroom to courtroom. So this is also something very interesting. If you know that your matter is allocated to court number 3, for example, we need to prepare our minutes in accordance with the orders passed by court number 3. So we need to be fully prepared. We need to have the formats of all the courts handy. The day we come to know our case has been allocated to some particular court, we need to keep our minutes of order handy. So thereafter, obtaining the details of auditor appointed by the NCLT. So in case of a transferor company, there is this auditor who is appointed, who assists the official liquidator to file his report. So during the course of the hearing, we need to request the bench to ensure that the auditor is appointed. Otherwise, there have been cases where this point has been missed out. A miscellaneous application has to be taken out, that has to be heard, and thereafter the auditor is appointed. So we need to be very careful that the auditor should be appointed at the first stage itself. Thereafter, soft copy of minutes and order and application. So this has to be carried in pen drive. The bench clearly says we are allowing the application subject to your submission of the soft copy of the minutes of order. So in many cases, it happens that people carry the minutes of order, but they don't carry the soft copy in pen drive. So then the bench says, then we'll adjourn the matter. Otherwise, if we don't get the soft copy, then it is quite a bit of a delay in uploading the final order. Right? Extra copy of the application. Many a times the original doesn't reach to the concerned bench. The bench expresses helplessness. See, we do not have the application copy. So we'll adjourn this and we'll direct the registry to produce the application next time. So if you want to avoid this, it is better to carry an extra copy of the application. It will facilitate early disposal. The next one is follow up for the order in case hearing is completed and matter is reserved for order. If the bench is satisfied, there will be two scenarios. One, the application is allowed. So then that means you can straight away pursue for the order. The other one is reserved for orders. Means the order will be pronounced. So that will come up for pronouncement and thereafter the order will be made available. So a follow-up for the same has to be made. Once the order is pronounced, make application for certified true copy of the order with the registry. You need to file an application. So as soon as the order is made available, you will get a certified true copy of the same. Thereafter, preparation and submission of documents with respect to RD's query letter. So once your application is allowed, you get the certified true copy of the order. You need to serve notices to various regulatory authorities, including ROC, RD, income tax, official liquidator, etc. As soon as you serve a notice to the regional director, they send you this standard letter, which is a very standard letter asking for various details pertaining to each and every company, that they want a copy of application, statement sent to shareholders, creditors, list of shareholders of petitioner companies, transferor company, transferee company. What about dividend? What about transfer of unclaimed dividend to IEPF? Details of related party transactions, any qualifications in auditor's report, etc. So this standard questionnaire is made available. It comes by post to the professional appearing for the petitioner companies. So this needs to be replied to. It says within 5 days, but then you need to ensure that this is filed before with the office of the regional director. As soon as your ROC report goes, immediately they will start working on preparing the RD report. So this is the standard query letter which is sent to all the companies for submission to the regional director's office. So course of action after admission of application in case of dispensation of meetings of shareholders. Friends, there can be two cases. One, meetings have been dispensed, and the other case would be meetings have been ordered. So first, let us see what happens if meetings are dispensed with. So arrange documents and information from the company as per the auditor's checklist. The auditor who is appointed to assist the official liquidator will send you a checklist that I need so and so, these many documents. So all of these documents needs to be arranged and forwarded to him so that he can start his audit, so as to prepare his report and file it with the official liquidator. Thereafter, service of notice to the sectoral regulators, that is registrar of companies, regional director, official liquidator, income tax for all companies separately by hand delivery, quoting permanent account number. Other regulators wherever applicable. So in case of income tax authority, generally during the times of this pandemic, it is possible that there is nobody to accept your service of the application. So service by email also is nowadays permitted. But as far as ROC, RD are concerned, they will definitely need the hard copy to prepare their reports, even the official liquidator. Other regulators, whosoever are there, they have to be served either by email or by post. So all the regulators will be mentioned in our order. We have to be very careful not to miss out on any regulator, else it may delay the process of the merger. Thereafter, filing of affidavit of service to NCLT containing acknowledgements of service as directed. So NCLT says after you have completed all of these services, you file an affidavit of service. Along with that, you attach all the proofs that you have served notice to all these regulatory authorities. Thereafter, inspection of documents and conducting of audit by the auditors. So the auditors, after you have submitted basic set of documents, they may ask you for certain more queries and clarifications which you need to provide. Accordingly, they will be in a position to file their report with the official liquidator. So now, in case where meetings are held, what would be the course of action? Arranging documents and information from the company as per the auditor's checklist, that is the same. Again, service of notice to sectoral regulators. Issue of notice to shareholders and creditors at least 30 days before the date of meeting in case dispensation is not granted. So here dispensation is not granted, you need to actually send notices to shareholders and creditors at least 30 days before the date of the meeting. And these notices are not common notices, they are notices which carry a lot of data. And NCLT benches have been very particular. If something is missed out, they have ordered sending notices again and convening of meetings again because you did not make the requisite disclosures to the shareholders and creditors. Thereafter, advertisement of notice of meetings in one English newspaper and at least one vernacular newspaper as directed by NCLT in its order. So this is as per the direction of NCLT, newspaper advertisement for convening the meetings. Thereafter, file affidavit of service that yes, I have complied with all the requirements as far as convening of meetings are concerned, plus service of notices to departments are concerned, etc. Thereafter, meetings have to be convened. Filing of chairman's report with NCLT on affidavit in case of meeting of shareholders and creditors along with scrutinizer's report. So every meeting there is a chairman, there is a scrutinizer. So the NCLT, we need to submit on affidavit the report of the chairman as well as the scrutinizer. And thereafter the inspection goes on of the documents which the auditor needs, who has been appointed by NCLT to assist the official liquidator. So it is the same as per the earlier slide. So filing of petition with NCLT. So your first application motion has been allowed, you got the order, you made services to all the departments, the official liquidator's auditor also has started his work. So thereafter, if in case your meetings are held, they have to be completed. So now comes the second stage, which is the petition stage. So a petition looks like this. So if it exceeds 300 pages, it has to be in different volumes. So this is the standard checklist of NCLT. So this is the index. It contains synopsis, date of events, then the petition, memorandum of appearance, memorandum and articles, audited statement of accounts of both the companies. Thereafter, scheme of amalgamation, copy of board resolutions. Thereafter, copy of order dated 11th March. So this is a first motion order. Thereafter, affidavit of service. certificate of accounting treatment that is for both the companies, affidavit in support of the petition. So in this manner, the petition has to be filed before NCLT. Accordingly, the restrictions are the same. It has to be presently on white legal paper, single side print, double spacing, and the measurements, etc. Font which has been showed earlier, all of that needs to be taken into consideration. So again, the same process. So this contains the synopsis in paragraph form, list of dates and events, updated memorandum and articles, latest audited financial statements, board resolutions, scheme of amalgamation arrangement, copy of order passed by Honorable NCLT allowing the application, certificate of accounting treatment as issued by the auditors, affidavit of service, chairman's report, affidavit verifying petition, memorandum of appearance. So the same process needs to be followed, by which if there are office objections, they have to be removed. Once office objections are removed, you will get a petition number allocated, and this will be listed in the very same court in which the first motion application was heard by default. So again, we need to track the date of hearing, because the first hearing, we do not know the date of hearing. So any day it can come. We need to be ready with the minutes of order for admission of petition. So attending the hearing and press for admission of petition and seek date of final hearing. So generally it is post 4 weeks of admission of petition. So thereafter you need to publish advertisement of final hearing. So it is an advertisement inviting objections from the general public, if any, and you clearly state that this petition was admitted on so and so date and the final hearing has been fixed for so and so date. Again, issue notices to regulatory authorities intimating them of the date of the final hearing. So again, all those regulators which we had served notices, they need to be informed that this application or this petition, this amalgamation, the final date of hearing has been fixed, the petition has been admitted. Thereafter, file affidavit of service again, that you have intimated all the authorities, we have published the newspaper advertisement, etc. Check official liquidator and RD report for specific observations. By this time, your official liquidator report and RD report should be ready, else you will keep on getting adjournments from the Honorable Tribunal for want of these reports. ROC report, if not submitted, RD report will not progress. If the chartered accountant doesn't file his report with his official liquidator, the official liquidator report will not progress. So simultaneously, as and when the application progresses, you file the petition, we need to ensure that simultaneously these reports are also progressing well, and by the date of final hearing, if both the reports, that is of official liquidator and RD, are available, then the matter would be disposed of on the day of the final hearing. So specific observations, there are two kinds of observations. We have covered that in the later part of our presentation. We will take it to that. So we have tried to prepare this chart. So representation by authorities to NCLT. So registrar of companies files his report to the regional director files his report with NCLT. Similarly, auditor appointed by NCLT files his report to the official liquidator files his report with NCLT. Thereafter, the minutes of order need to be initialed from RD office. So this was a requirement for some time. Many a times they insist that you get the minutes of order initialed from the RD office. Many a times it is not insisted. So it is better if we have enough time, then we can prepare the minutes of order, lodge it with the regional director's office, and they can initial the same. So the bench will be convinced that the regional director has already seen these minutes. So we can go ahead and approve the amalgamation. Course of action after approval of the scheme. So now your final hearing has taken place. So thereafter, you need to file an application for the certified true copy of order immediately upon pronouncement of order. So the order is signed, the order is ready. You make an application for certified true copy, and the scheme, you need to print it and hand it over along with the application for certified true copy. The NCLT will not print the scheme for you, and they will just put the round stamp on the scheme which you submit. They will just print the order and certify that and give it to you. So the scheme has to be printed And say, for example, if you need 5 copies of the order, you will have to pay for those 5 copies, and 5 copies of the scheme will have to be handed over so that they can attach the order on each of the schemes and give it to you. So payment of cost to regional director and official liquidator through Bharat Kosh portal online if ordered. This was being ordered earlier. Presently, it is not being ordered, but in case tomorrow again the stance changes and they start imposing cost, then this cost has to be paid. Transferor company should not have any pending SRN with ROC. So this is a very important point. What happens is people file DPT3. This is a form which is a non-STP form, and generally in so many cases we have seen that it takes more than 1 year for approval of these forms. So there are cases, say for example, there was a charge form filed which was not filed in time, and it has now become a case of condonation of delay. You never filed an application with regional director to condone the delay. So the SRN is open in your system. So the transferor company's status in the master data will not change to amalgamated until and unless all the SRNs of the transferor companies are closed. Even if there is a live SRN, say pending for payment, there was a technical issue, SRN was generated, but the payment was not successful, that also has to be cancelled. Until and unless all SRNs of transferor companies are closed, the INC 28 for the transferee company will not be approved by the system itself. It will pop up that this SRN is pending, that SRN is pending. So you need to ensure that all those SRNs are closed. So the transferor company should not file any other form with ROC except form INC 28 once the final hearing is completed. See, this is very important. What happens that in the form of compliance, we try to file several forms, even though the merger is complete and INC 28 is just about to be filed, and we have, even if we file INC 28, if there is a due date for say a DPT3 or an MSME, in case of an STP form, there are no issues. You file it and it gets approved, taken on record directly by the system. But in case of a form which needs backend approval, so those forms would create an issue while INC 28 is being approved by ROC. They will say that this SRN is open. We will not be able to approve INC 28. The status of the company will not change to amalgamated. So we need to ensure that we do not file any form for the transferor company once final hearing is completed. So straight away it's INC 28, and if it is taken on record, the status of the company will change to amalgamated. So that is the end of it. So filing of certified true copy of order with ROC in form INC 28 within 30 days from the receipt of certified true copy of the order. Friends, this is also very important. After the order is pronounced, we immediately need to make an application for certified true copy, else the time period of 30 days allowed to file INC 28 gets reduced. So nowadays, during the pandemic, we have several cases where the order is passed somewhere in May and the certified true copy has come in the month of July. So there are cases where you write the date of order as of July, and the form comes for resubmission stating that the date of the order is not matching with that mentioned in INC 28. So we need to ensure that we apply for certified true copy immediately, and then whenever the order comes, we will not have any issues in filing the same, but it needs to be done within 30 days from the receipt of certified true copy of the order. So application or letter to ROC for combining the authorized share capital for attaching the same in INC 28 for transferee company. So along with the INC 28, it is always useful if we attach a letter stating that this is the authorized capital of the transferor company, this is the authorized capital of the transferee company. So the new authorized capital will be 2 crores plus 5 crores is equal to 7 crores. So the ROC knows that at the time of approving the form, they need to merge the share capital and thereafter approve the form. Filing of order with stamp duty authority within 60 days from the date of passing order or as specified in the order. So that is for stamp duty adjudication. It is mandatory to file. If you have properties outside the state where the order has been passed, you need to file this order with all the respective stamp duty authorities in the respective states, because all the properties of the transferor company are now properties of the transferee company. So all the stamp duty authorities, wherever you have properties, you need to lodge this order there. So now we come to the main part of today's presentation, observations of the regional director and response of the petitioner. Friends, as I said earlier, there are two kinds of observations by the regional director. One is standard observations, one is specific observations. In case of standard observations, these are just very observations which are quite normal in nature, and they are just mentioned for the sake of compliance. So standard observations have standard answers, so they do not come in the way of any merger. So there are a few standard observations which we have listed out. So the first one is observation: in compliance of AS 14, the petitioner companies shall pass such accounting entries which are necessary in connection with the scheme to comply with other applicable accounting standards such as AS 5, IND, AS 8, etc. So the response which is given by the company in response to the observation made by the RD is: apropos observation of the regional director as stated in his report concerned, the petitioner companies through authorized representative undertakes to comply with such applicable accounting standards for amalgamation while passing necessary entries in connection with the scheme. So this is the standard answer to be given. So the next one is: as per definition of the scheme, appointed date means the first day of October 2018 or such other date directed by or stipulated by the Mumbai bench of NCLT or any other competent authority may otherwise direct or fix. Effective date means the later of the dates of the orders of the NCLT vesting the assets, properties, liabilities, rights, duties, obligations and like of the transferor company in the transferee company are filed with the ROC after obtaining the necessary consents, approvals, permissions, resolutions, agreements, sanctions and orders in this regard. Further, the petitioners may be asked to comply with the requirements and clarified wide circular number 712/2019 dated 21st August 2019 issued by MCA. So the response to this: apropos observation of the RD as stated in his report concerned, the petitioner companies confirm that the definition appointed date means 1st October 2018. Further, clause 3.2 of the scheme specifies that appointed date shall be 1st October 2018. Further, the petitioner companies confirm that the effective date shall be the date on which certified or authenticated copies of the order sanctioning this scheme by the Mumbai bench or of NCLT is filed with the registrar of companies by the transferor company and the transferee company as required under the provisions of the Companies Act. The petitioners further undertake to comply with the circular 712/2019 CL1 dated 21st August 2019 issued by MCA. Observation: petitioner company have to undertake to comply with section 232(3)(1) of the Companies Act 2013, whereby the transferor company is dissolved. The fee, if any, paid by the transferor company on its authorized capital shall be set off against any fees payable by the transferee company on its authorized capital subsequent to the amalgamation, and therefore the petitioners to affirm that they comply the provisions of this section. Friends, this is a very burning issue nowadays. What has happened? People have filed INC 28 for amalgamation. ROC says that you need to comply with the provisions of this section. What does this section say? It says that, for example, if the authorized capital of the transferor company is 50 lakh rupees, right? And you want to take credit of that 50 lakh rupee authorized capital in the transferee company. So the authorized capital, say, of the transferee company is 50 lakh rupees. So ultimately 50 lakh plus 50 lakh is equal to 1 crore. So they want you to pay the difference. For example, you have already paid a sum of, for example, say 60,000 rupees for the earlier authorized capital, but the new authorized capital, if you increase in current date, it costs you 1 lakh rupees. So they are saying you need to pay the difference of 40,000 rupees. Only then we will club the authorized capital, else we will approve the form without combining the authorized capital. So this has been argued and discussed. Everything is done, but ROC is not convinced. So they have started approving forms without combining the authorized share capital. And now we have to make an application for master data correction, explaining them if we have paid in excess or if we need to pay the difference. So we are expecting hundreds of master data correction applications to flow in with the ROC after the INC 28 is approved, because now ROC has taken a very strong stand and said that we will have to check if there is any additional fees payable. If you have paid lesser amount of fees as per the earlier provision and the fees payable now, if you increase the capital now, is higher, then you will have to pay the difference. Otherwise, we are not increasing the authorized capital. We are not combining the authorized capital. So if you do not have any surplus authorized capital, it would be very difficult to complete the allotment of secure shares to the shareholders of the transferor companies as per the swap ratio. So this provision has been now taken up very seriously by ROC, and we need to first take into consideration before even if you start the merger, that is there any differential amount which will be payable to ROC while combining the authorized capital of the transferor company with the transferee company. So nowadays this has been very recent, and all the forms are being approved without combining the authorized capital. So once we make an application for master data correction, at that point of time it will be evaluated by the ROC, and they will be in a position to tell you that you need to pay the difference. Once you pay the difference, you come to us, then we will combine the authorized capital of the transferor company with the transferee company. So the response generally given before the NCLT is, apropos observation of the RD as stated in his report concerned, the petitioner companies through authorized representative undertakes to comply with the provisions of 232(3)(I) of the Companies Act. So ROC says, see, you have undertaken before the RD, I mean before the NCLT, in the order it is mentioned that you undertake to comply, so you need to pay the difference, otherwise I am not combining your authorized capital. So this is something which is very important, a very recent development which we need to take into consideration. Observation: NCLT may kindly direct the petitioner to file an undertaking to the extent that the scheme enclosed to the company application and the scheme enclosed to the company petition are one and same, and there is no discrepancy or deviation. Friends, there have been cases where the scheme attached with the first motion application is different and the one attached with the company petition is different. So when the order is passed by NCLT, by the Honorable Tribunal, so thereafter the scheme which we get, which in fact we give, so there may be deviations. So they are taking our undertaking in the order itself that it is one and the same. So the response to the same is, as far as the observation of the regional director stated in his report are concerned, petitioner companies through their counsel undertakes that the scheme enclosed to the company application and enclosed to the company petition is one and the same, and there is no deviation. The next one, the petitioner under provision of section 230 subsection 5 of the Companies Act 2013 have to serve notices to concerned authorities which are likely to be affected by the amalgamation. Further, the approval of the scheme by this honorable tribunal may not deter such authorities to deal with any of the issues arising after giving effect to the scheme. The decision of such authorities is binding on the petitioner companies. So the response is, as far as the observation of the regional director made in his report is concerned, the petitioner company state that the petitioners have already served copy of the notice along with the scheme and application upon registrar of companies, regional director, official liquidator, and income tax authority. Further, the petitioner companies undertake that the approval of the scheme by this tribunal may not deter authorities to whom notice has been served to deal with any of the issues arising after giving effect to the scheme. The decision of such authorities is binding on the petitioner company. So now we come to specific observations. The standard observations were the ones which we saw earlier. They are quite common in nature, but then there are certain specific observations which are specific to your merger. So these need to be taken care of very minutely, because they can create a bit of anxiety, and sometimes it may result in filing additional affidavits and making further submissions before the court. It can delay the merger as well. So this was an observation in the order of Cyfast Enterprises dated 22nd October 2019. So the NCLT observed, it is submitted that with the reference to the audited financials of the petitioner companies, it is noticed that transferor company did not have any business in the last 2 or more years. Further, the transferor company is having negative net worth. The petitioner companies may be put to proof as to how the stated object shall be achieved by the scheme. More so, the transferor company is otherwise liable to be struck off under 248(1)(c) of the Companies Act 2013. So we'll just see the response to that. We have this order here. Yeah. So we have highlighted the response, and in fact this was argued by us before Honorable NCLT. Apropos observation of the regional director, Western Region, Mumbai, has stated in paragraph 4H of his report concerned, the petitioner company states as under. Transferor company has generated revenue of 6,27,000 rupees in financial year 17-18 and rupees 6,37,000 in financial year 16-17, which is also reflected in audited balance sheet as submitted with the Office of Regional Director. The company is regular in filing of its annual return with ROC and income tax return with IT department. The transferor company is having positive net worth. So it did not have negative net worth. Somehow they wrote that it has negative net worth. And even the bench asked us that can companies with negative net worth cannot be merged? So it was our answer that they can be merged if shareholders and creditors approve the scheme. So the transferor company is having positive net worth of 6 crores and 5.95 crores respectively for the financial year ended 18 and 17. The transferor company is merging with its holding company, that is AFL Private Limited, and the transferor company and transferee company are doing business as a going concern. The transferor company and transferee company are under the same management, and it would be advantageous to combine the activities and operation in a single company. Further, the transferor company shall be dissolved without being wound up. So what the IRD wants to say is that the company should be struck off and it should not be merged. Our contention was that if it is struck off, I can always come back under section 252 and revive the company. So ROC doesn't say that it does not have operation, but somehow the RD came and said, no, it should be struck off, it should not be merged. And upon Form INC 28 being filed with ROC, all the assets and liabilities will be vested with the transferee company and I cannot come back. So this would be a more fruitful proposition for the regional director's office. So it was our argument that if we merge, we cannot come back. So the regional director should be more than happy to allow us to be merged rather than to strike us off from the register of companies. So this was the order passed. So the next specific observation coming up. Yeah, independent auditors report. So this order was passed on 6th May 2020, very recently. Independent auditors report for 15-16, 16-17, 17-18 of Trueform Techno Products Limited inter alia states that the company has provided its gratuity and leave encashment liability as accrued at year end and as determined by themselves and not as per actuarial valuation method required by AS 15. Extract amount of difference between the amounts as has been provided and as should have been provided could not be qualified for lack of necessary information. The same has consequential impact on profit and liability of the company of an indeterminate amount and further consequential inability to meet the disclosure requirement of AS 15 in financial statements. The company does not have necessary information regarding status of its creditors and accordingly amount due to MSME as defined under Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise Development Act 2006 could not be separately disclosed. In this regard, petitioner company may be directed to undertake to make good the default. So the response. As far as the observation of the regional director stated in his report is concerned, the petitioner transferee company states that the transferee company undertakes to file the necessary compounding application in respect of qualification made by independent auditors report for these years. We have this order here. Yes, so NCLT has said that most of the observations made by RD pertain to procedural compliances and standard observations regarding adherence to accounting standards, setting of fees paid by transferor companies against the fees payable, if any, by the transferee company in case of increase authorized capital following the merger. The petitioner transferee company has also correctly agreed to abide by the observations made by the regional director. Therefore, nothing more needs to be said in the matter. So the company has admitted that yes, we will go for compounding. Instead, they could have always said that such things cannot stop a merger, and in case any proceedings are to be initiated by the ROC or RD post the merger, it will be responsibility of the transferee company to take care of the same. So this could have been contested also. The company has made an admission that yes, we accept that this is a default and we will go for compounding. So now they are bound to go for compounding. Instead, there was an option by which they could have said that it can be contested separately. It cannot be a ground to stall this merger. But unfortunately, they have accepted their fault and now they will have to file compounding applications. So we can come back to the slide. So this was the next specific observation coming up. It is submitted that with reference to the further information provided by the petitioner companies by letter dated acknowledgement 18th April 2020, this order was passed on 15th May. It is noticed that some of the transferor companies did not have revenue from business operation in the last 3 or more years. Further, transferor companies 2, 3 and 4 have negative net worth. The petitioner companies may be put to strict proof with facts and figures as to how the stated rational object shall be achieved. So this is as similar to the first specific observation. So in this case, the response was, in response to the observations made by the regional director, the petitioner companies clarifying as that so far as the observation in the report of the RD is concerned, the petitioner company submitted that the amalgamation will enable the transferee company to consolidate the business and lead to synergies in operation and create a stronger financial base, and that it would be advantageous to combine the activities and operations of all the companies into a single company for synergistic linkages and the benefit of combined financial resources. This will be reflected in the profitability of the transferee company. So this judgment is also here. So there were quite a few companies in this. Yes, these are the observations. Yes, so this will be reflected in the profitability of the transferee company. So it is there, and so then the benefit is there, and from the material, it appears that the scheme is not prejudicial and fair and reasonable, not violative of any provisions of law, not contrary to public policy. So NCLT has gone ahead and approved this amalgamation. Yeah, the next observation. Yeah, as regards to the objection of the creditor to the proposed scheme of the arrangement, the Honorable Tribunal may issue notice to the objector of the petitioner company and may be asked to submit no objection of the objectors. So as far as the observation of the regional director as stated in the report and reproduced herein above is concerned, the counsel for the petitioner submits as follows. Petitioner company submit that the objector, namely Amarupa Engineering and Mining Private Limited, is not appearing as a creditor in the books of accounts of the company, and there is no provision under the Companies Act 2013 which requires the petitioners to obtain prior consent of the objector. No miscellaneous application has been taken out by the objector setting forth his objections and nature of purported claim. Under section 230 subsection 4 of the Companies Act, for an objector to oppose, his debt should be 5% of the total debt of the company as per the latest audited balance sheet. The purported amount claimed by the objector is to the tune of 1,75 lakhs, which does not meet the threshold provided above. As per the last audited balance sheet of the demerged company as on 31st March 19, the total debt of the first petitioner company is 188 crores. Further, the purported amount claimed is disputed and not admitted by the petitioner. The objector is free to adopt any legal proceedings as may be advised to him, which will be decided in accordance with law. So what has happened, an objector has come before the tribunal saying that I have this amount of 1,75 lakhs which I need to take from the company, but somehow his name doesn't appear in the list of creditors as tabulated by the company. So the NCLT has said, we have the order as well. It was just very recently passed. So NCLT has gone and said that you are below 5% and you go ahead and you can adopt exhaust all your legal options to recover this amount from the company, if at all, but you cannot come and stop this merger. So this order was passed and thereafter the scheme was sanctioned. We can share all of these orders as well. If anybody needs the presentation and orders, everything is for sharing. So anybody needing it can definitely send a request. We'll definitely send it across. So it is here. So the purported claim amount is to the tune of 1,75 lakhs, which doesn't meet the threshold. So as per the last audited balance sheet, the total debt is 188 crores and the objector is free to adopt any legal proceedings as may be advised to him, which will be decided in accordance to law. But the fact remains that you cannot stop the merger. If any such thing, you go and approach the authority. So it is a settled law that a creditor cannot use the scheme as a tool to recover debts which are disputed, as the jurisdiction of the tribunal under section 230 to 232 of the Companies Act 2013 is supervisory and not appellate jurisdiction, and under supervisory jurisdiction this tribunal cannot adjudicate his claim. So it is very important, the jurisdiction of the tribunal is not an appellate jurisdiction, it is only a supervisory jurisdiction. So the tribunal cannot adjudicate his claim. So thereafter the scheme was allowed, the order was passed, the merger was sanctioned. Can we come to the next observation, please? Yeah. Another observation, order dated 15th of May. Further, as per definitions, clause 1.2 of the scheme, appointed date means the first day of April 2015 or such other date as the Honorable NCLT may direct. In this regard, it is submitted that the financial statements of the transferor companies and the transferee companies filed up to 31st March 2017. Further, financial statements for the financial year 17-18 in respect of all the petitioners is shortly due, that is 30th September 2018. The scheme appears to be redundant as on date, hence the scheme may be rejected. So RD came down and said, okay. Yeah, the response. Apropos response of the observation of the Regional Director Western Region Mumbai, as stated in his report, is concerned, the counsel for the petitioner submit that the scheme was approved by respective board of directors of the petitioner companies in their respective meetings held on 1st July 2015. Thereafter, the petitioners filed company application, and in these circumstances, the appointed date was fixed as 1st April 2015. The counsel for the petitioner submit that it is open for the petitioner companies to choose appointed date depending on their commercial exigencies as held by various courts, and merely if the appointed date is 1st April 2015, the scheme does not become redundant. However, the counsel for the petitioner submit that without going into the controversy, the petitioners companies have in their respective extraordinary general meetings held on 27 October 2018 decided to shift the appointed date from 1st April 2015 to 1st April 2018, and in view thereof the objection of the regional director does not survive. So they decided, they all clarified the legal position, but then they said that now we are shifting the appointed date. So shifting the appointed date also is possible. Once the petition is filed, application is filed, you can shift the appointed date as well. But then you can always have a old appointed date, that is also permissible. But due to this ministry circular dated 21st September 2019, you will have to explain if any appointed date is more than 1 year back. So if you have an older appointed date, you need to give explanations for that, but the law doesn't say you cannot have an old appointed date. Insofar as filing of financial statements for financial year 17-18, the same has been filed by the respective companies with the ROC on 29th October 2018, wide SRN number so and so, because RD had pointed out that the accounts for 18 will be filed very shortly, they will be due very shortly. So they have filed the accounts before the date of the hearing. So apropos observation of the RD Western Region, as stated in paragraph 4B of his report is concerned, the petitioners confirm and submit that the appointed date has been fixed as 1st April 2018, which is in compliance with section 232 subsection 6 of the Companies Act, and the scheme shall be effective from such appointed date. Further, the petitioner companies undertake to comply with the requirements clarified in circular number F number 7/12/2019 dated 21st August 2019 by MCA. So we have this order readily available. We'll just scroll down and show you where it was mentioned. Yes, scheme appears to be redundant, hence the scheme may be rejected. So it's the first observation, then the effective date, the second observation, then they have those two standard observations. So accordingly, the petitioners have affirmed that they have changed this appointed date. Even if they continue with the old one, it is not against the law. So accordingly, they have mentioned everything in the order, and NCLT has approved the amalgamation. Yeah, next one, please. Yes. Petitioner companies decided on 21st May 2020. Petitioner company may be asked to submit clarification regarding the complaint as mentioned in serial number 9 of the above table. So this serial number 9 of the above table is always a complaint referred to made by the ROC. ROC points out there is some complaint which is pending. So it is captured in serial number 9 of the above table. That is a very standard practice as far as RD reports are concerned. So the response, insofar as the observation made in paragraph 4.1 of the report submitted by the regional director is concerned, the petitioner company submitted that it is unaware of the complaint filed and has received no notice from Registrar of Companies, Mumbai. The petitioner company submitted that from an overview of the said report, it appears that the complaint has been made against the petitioner company and in respect of a loan allegedly in violation of section 185 of the Companies Act 2013. The petitioner company submitted that it has passed a special resolution on 26 March 2019 through postal ballot to advance loan to its subsidiary or associate or joint venture or group entity or any person in which any director of the petitioner company is deemed to be interested, and such resolution was passed in compliance with applicable provisions of the Companies Act 2013, including section 185. The petitioner company submitted that once petitioner company receives the complaint from ROC, the petitioner company will duly address the complaint filed against it expeditiously. So a complaint which was pending also does not hold water. The scheme is sanctioned, and if at all any complaint remains which is pending for the transferor company, it will be the duty of the transferee company to address the same. The scheme cannot be put on hold for any pending complaint. So we have the order as well here. So Hind Lamps versus with Bajaj Electricals. So yes, so they have mentioned all of the clarifications in the order on each of the points. All the observations, specific as well as specific observations as well as standard observations, have been addressed. So accordingly, the scheme was sanctioned. So this can be, these are the explanations submitted by the company. Yes, we can come back to the original. Yes. So order dated 26 June. The transferor company 2 is engaged in the business of real estate. Hence, the petitioner company may be directed to comply or clarify the applicability of RERA, Real Estate Regulation and Development Act 2016, with Maharashtra Rules and Regulations 2017. So the response, so far as the objection of the regional director as stated in his affidavit is concerned, it is clarified that transferor company number 2 is not engaged in any real estate business, nor there is no real estate project undertaken by the transferor company number 2 or by any of the petitioner companies, and that there is no real estate project being transferred or is likely to be affected by the proposed scheme of amalgamation, and hence petitioner company hereby clarifies that the provisions of RERA and or Maharashtra Rules and Regulations 2017 made thereunder are not applicable to the petitioner companies or any of its activity. Further, it is clarified that in pursuance of order dated 4th November 2019, passed in CA-CAA 84, CA-CAA 85, 86 and 58, transferee company has given notice to Gujarat Real Estate Regulatory Authority and filed affidavit of service dated 25th November 2019. However, there is no representation or objection to the scheme received by the company of the petitioner companies or filed before the National Company Law Tribunal from the said authority opposing the scheme. So we have this order as well. So they had identified this regulator and served notice well in advance. So that is the importance of identifying sectoral regulators. It was a real estate company. They already served notices to RERA. Since there was no objection received, even the RD mentioned that you need to service notice and NOC is needed, but they filed an affidavit stating that we have already intimated them. And so NCLT proceeded to sanction the scheme. So it is here. Yeah, this one. So it's mentioned here. If we can go up further. Yeah, transferor number 2 companies engaged in the business of real estate, and they have clarified that these objections of the RD are not sustainable since they are already intimated RERA and filed affidavit of service. So NCLT proceeded to sanction the scheme. So the order approving the merger was passed. Can we come to the next one? Yes. As per the 24th of July, very recently, as per the master data on MCA portal, the transferor company has 3 open charges with open status since 2005, 2007 and 2012 for 80 lakhs, 5 lakh 50,000 and 3 crore 38 lakh 82,000 respectively. So in response, As far as the observation of the regional director stated in his report are concerned, the petitioner companies undertake that the said arrangement is in the form of a demerger. The business operations of Ugao Agritech are being segregated to form a separate company, that is a resulting company. As such, there is no dissolution of the entities taking place. Hence, the open status of the charges of the transferor company would not affect this arrangement and is not prejudicial to the interests of its members and creditors. Can we have this judgment also? So open charges also will not stall the merger, because in case of a transferor company, they will be transferred to the transferee company. So such observations also do not come in the way of a merger. Yes, here it was. It is, yeah. So they have, these clarifications have been accepted, and thereafter the scheme has been sanctioned. Yes. The next one. So this was a case of a foreign company merging into an Indian company. So this company, Reliance Holding USA Inc., the transferor company, is a foreign company corporation incorporated in United States of America. So this merger recently got completed, by which a foreign company based in USA got merged into Reliance Industries Limited, which is a company incorporated in India. So Reliance Holding USA Transferor Company is a foreign company incorporated pursuant to, in accordance with the General Corporation Law of State of Delaware, as amended from time to time, having employer identification number so and so, and having its principal office at so and so in the United States of America, and does not fall within the jurisdiction of this tribunal. Accordingly, similar approvals be obtained by the above said transferor company in accordance with the laws of United States of America. So the answer to this was, as far as the observation made in the report of the regional director is concerned, the petitioner company submitted that transferor company 1 is a foreign company incorporated pursuant to and in accordance with the General Corporation Law of State of Delaware and does not fall within the jurisdiction of this tribunal. The petitioner companies further submitted that similar approvals may be applicable will be obtained by the transferor company 1 in accordance with the applicable laws of United States of America. So the other observation in the same order, since Reliance Holding USA Inc. transferor company is situated in the state of Delaware, USA, the FEMA regulations, RBI guidelines, if any applicable, is to be complied with by the transferor or transferee company. So the response was, as far as the observation made in paragraph 4 of the report of the regional director is concerned, the petitioner company submitted that since transferor company 1 is situated in the state of Delaware, USA, the FEMA regulations, RBI guidelines as may be applicable will be complied with. Observation, the company is not an NBFC, but there is transfer of shares from foreign shareholders to Indian shareholders. So this is some other order. So the company has issued notice to RBI, may be decided on its merits. Petitioner company undertake to clarify the same. As far as the observation of the report of the regional director is concerned, the observation of the ROC is self-explanatory, since it has been stated by the ROC that though the petitioner companies are not NBFC, all the petitioner companies have served intimation to RBI. The petitioner companies further clarify that the shareholding of the first petitioner company and second petitioner company has been changed from non-resident to resident in the month of March 2020, and as required, the said petitioner companies have already served intimation to RBI by filing relevant form, which was FCTRS, as per prescribed procedure. The petitioner companies clarify that there has been no transfer of shares in the case of third petitioner company. Further, the third petitioner company undertakes through its counsel to comply in case of the petitioner companies receives any communication to RBI. We have this order as well. We'll just go through that. Yes, we'll go straight to that observation. Yeah. Yes, these are the clarifications given by the company to all the observations, which were accepted by NCLT, and the scheme was sanctioned. Yes. Yes. Yeah. We come to the last observation, which is the observation by the official liquidator. This order is a very crucial order which was passed on 11th of August, just very, very recently in the case of VG MedSafe. We'll just go through this. So in this order, yes, we'll go through the highlighted portion first. Yes. So it is observed during the year ending 31st March 2019, TDS reimbursable to the company of 98 lakhs is debited to profit and loss account and provided as amount payable to the erstwhile promoter director of the company. The same was disclosed in audited financial statements for 31st March 19. As per scheme of amalgamation, clause 4.3 and clause number 19, all income tax refunds receivable, tax deducted at source shall be transferred to or to be deemed to be transferred to the transferee company. This TDS debited to P&L account and credited to the erstwhile directors of the companies against the scheme of amalgamation. As the same is not a business expense and it is not allowable to the company, and hence the same was disallowed by the company in the computation of total income for 1920. According to us, the erstwhile directors have derived undue benefit from such a transaction. Next one, the company has incurred various expenses of 2 crores 72 lakhs being expenses in relation to share transfer stated in clause 12.5 above. It should not have been incurred by the erstwhile directors of the company for valuation of their shares, transfer of shares, in identifying intending purchaser of shares. So according to us, the erstwhile directors of the company have derived undue benefit from such transaction directly or indirectly, which is expensed out in the profit and loss account for the year ended 31st March 2019, and the same is disallowed while doing computation for the total income and total income tax return filed by the company. As it clearly indicates, it is not a business expense, and the erstwhile directors of the company derived undue benefits from such transactions which is incurred by the company. Further, in the supplementary report, it is stated that the directors of VG MedSafe Private Limited has paid the following professional fees for the valuation of its shares and other legal compliance. The details of such expenses are given below. Biostech is 1.18 crore. Then there is some R&D associates, 1,47,000. So this is for FEMA compliance. Then this is for professional fees for presentation with various investors. Then advisory services. So 2 crores 72 lakhs has been paid out. The company has debited these expenses to profit and loss account, which was incurred towards valuation of company shares, identifying intending buyer of existing shares of the company by transfer of shares, change in ownership of the company for and on behalf of the seller of shares. All these expenses were required to be paid by the seller of shares of the company, that is erstwhile directors of the company in their individual capacity. These expenses are personal expenses and non-business expenses debited to profit and loss account and disallowed under Income Tax Act 1961. The said company also debited TDS payable to VG MedSafe Private Limited of 98 lakhs. During the year 19, TDS reimbursable to the company of 98 lakhs is debited to P&L account and provided as amount payable to the erstwhile promoter director of the company by way of book entry. The same is disallowed by the company in the computation of total income and income tax return filed by company for 1920. Clearly indicates that these expenses are not business expenses of the company. By debiting such expenses, the losses of the transferor company increased to the tune of 3 crores 70 lakh 96,000 rupees, that is 272 plus 98 lakhs. It is the duty of the company auditors under section 143 to qualify the audit report if such personal expenses are debited to profit and loss account, which is in non-compliance with the provisions of Companies Act 2013. As per the scheme of amalgamation, clause 4.3 and clause number 19, all income tax refund receivable, tax deducted at source shall be transferred to or to be deemed to be transferred to the transferee company. This TDS debited to the profit and loss account and credited to the erstwhile directors of the companies against the scheme of amalgamation. It is stated in the reply to our report that TDS refundable to the company of 98 lakhs is provided as payable to erstwhile directors of the company was as per clause 2.2 of schedule 3 of share purchase agreement. The share purchase agreement is between buyer and seller of the shares for consideration to be settled by them for sale of shares inter se. The same cannot be debited to profit and loss account of the company, thereby reducing profit, increasing loss of the company. By such a clause mentioned in the share purchase agreement between the buyer and seller is prejudicial to the interest of the company. As the company is a separate legal entity, any tax refund available to the company belongs to the company and not to the seller. Also, seller sales shares expenses cannot be debited to profit and loss account of the company. As per our observation for TDS refundable to the company, and share transfer expenses incurred by the erstwhile management of the company be treated as misapplication of the fund of the company as noticed by us during the course of scrutiny of the books of accounts. Hence, such expenses incurred by the company are prejudicial to the interest of the company and its members. So according to us, the erstwhile directors of the company have derived undue benefit from such transaction directly or indirectly, which is expensed out in the P&L account for 2019. Hence, based on a report, official liquidator to frame their opinion considering the factual position enumerated above, while filing the representation to NCLT under 230 subsection 5 of the Companies Act for the scheme of amalgamation of VG VedSafe Private Limited with PPD Pharmaceuticals Development India Private Limited and their respective shareholders. So the company has given various clarifications stating that whatever we have done, it is well within the ambit. So they have clarified all of these points that pursuant to merger, all assets and liabilities will be transferred to the transferee company. Necessary entries have been passed. The accounts were not qualified by the auditors, and they have relied on certain other judgments, which is this. In case of official liquidator, Arogya Ginning and Manufacturing Mills versus Gulabchand Chandalia, it was held by Gujarat High Court that mere mistakes or error in adopting accounting policies cannot amount to misfeasance unless it results in any loss to company or any undue gain to directors or to other persons. In case of Sham Dasani, it was held that where points involved were really technical matters of correct or incorrect accounting, they do not normally fall within a criminal charge under this section. At any rate, where no dishonesty or motive for dishonesty is shown and where in certain particulars the directors have acted on the advice of counsel. So similarly, there is this third judgment in which there is no personal benefit, so the company cannot be liable for any misfeasance. So there was this fifth judgment. So the company has stated so many judgments by which the settled legal proposition of law was stated that all of this cannot stop a merger. So thereafter, the NCLT has considered and approved the merger, even though it was a qualified report from the official director's office. So here it is. The two issues flagged by the chartered accountant appointed to scrutinize the books of accounts of transferor company are: TDS of 98 lakhs is debited to P&L account, that the professional consultancy fees is in relation to transfer of shares of the company has been incorrectly debited to P&L account, whereas it should have been accounted for by the sellers. As far as the first issue is concerned, bench feels that it is only a question of accounting for the same under the wrong head of account. Mere mistakes in accounting practices would not be enough to scuttle sanction of the scheme. So they have mentioned these judgments which the company had stated. And accordingly, they have allowed this amalgamation. So the last paragraph says, yes. Further, it is a matter of commercial expediency to incur such expenses as a business person would consider prudent for the purposes of business, even if such expense may not be a legal obligation. This ipso facto would not be enough to reject the scheme unless it can be shown that such expenditure is fraudulent in nature or for similar reasons. It is not for the official liquidators, it is not the OL's case that there is any fraudulent conduct of business or that the affairs of the transferor company have been carried out in a manner prejudicial to public interest. Therefore, we accept the arguments advanced by the learned counsel for the petitioner companies. However, we leave it to the authorities concerned to see if there is any violation of accounting standards or other provisions of law and to take action as may be deemed appropriate under the law. The sanction of the scheme shall not stand in the way of any action to which petitioner companies may be liable to in accordance with law. So accordingly, it was made absolute. The scheme was sanctioned. The merger was approved. Yes. So fast track merger, we go through this in a brief because to our experience, fast track has never been fast track, and it is a very great task to actually get this completed. Since government departments are involved, quite a lot of complications come in and there is not much of transparency. So at least there is a court known as NCLT to which these authorities have to report. So it is always our view that NCLT is the best possible forum for any merger. So the following companies are eligible: holding and wholly owned subsidiaries between small companies having paid up share capital which does not exceed 50 lakhs, turnover which does not exceed 2 crores. So procedure is drafting the scheme of merger, convening board meeting for the approval of scheme, filing notice along with a copy of scheme for merger, inviting objections or suggestions if any in form CA 9 to ROC, official liquidator or persons affected by the scheme, filing of declaration of solvency with ROC in form CAA 10, E form GNL2, along with copy of board resolution, statement of assets and liabilities, auditor's report on the statement of assets and liabilities. Issuing notice of the meeting of shareholders along with scheme of the company, issuing notice along with the scheme to the creditors of the company, convening general meeting of shareholders and obtaining the approval of shareholder holding at least 90% of the total number of shares irrespective of those present in the meeting, convening general meeting of creditors and obtaining the approval of creditors majority representing 9/10 in value if the creditors irrespective of those present in the meeting. So if your list of creditors is 1000 creditors, you need consent and approval of 900. So it's not how many are present in the meeting, you have to have 9/10 approval. Transferee company has to file the approved scheme and report of the results of the meetings in form CA 11 along with the notice earlier sent to RD, ROC, official liquidator. The registrar of companies and official liquidator may give objections or suggestions, if any, to the regional director within 30 days of receipt of the scheme. In case no objection is received, the regional director shall register the same and issue the confirmation thereof to the company in form CA 12. In case of any objections or suggestions from ROC and OL, or if RD is of the opinion that the scheme is not in public interest, it may file an application before the tribunal in form CA 13 for consideration within a period of 60 days from the date of receipt of the scheme. Filing of the order passed by the regional director approving the scheme in INC 28 with ROC within 30 days. So we come to frequently asked questions, problems faced by professionals, the challenges as to how do we ensure that we go through the process in a smooth way, we do not undergo hurdles. So the very commonly asked question is, how do I prepare for the hearing? So as we shared earlier, we need to have the checklist and minutes of order ready in all respects. And we should be very well aware of the businesses of the companies as to what kind of synergies would arise out of the merger. So it's not just about looking at the companies. It is about understanding the real reason why which the amalgamation takes place. Why do you want to amalgamate? You should have the commercial nature and the commercial reason for that, why this merger is actually taking place. We come across a lot of schemes which are merely copy paste. But nowadays NCLT are very clear. They specifically may ask you, why do you want to undergo this exercise? What benefits you would derive? So you need to have an answer which is relevant to your scheme. So 3 things to be kept into mind. One is the checklist. The other one is the minutes of order. And the third one, the commercial rationale behind the merger. In the application, we have prayed for convening meetings of creditors and shareholders. However, now we want to seek dispensation. Is it possible? Yes. Even if you have filed the application in which you have prayed that you want to hold the meeting, you can very well file an additional affidavit before the hearing. And during the hearing, you can bring it to the attention of the bench that yes, in the application, we have mentioned prayers that we want to hold the meetings. However, we have managed to get the consent of shareholders and we'll serve notice to creditors. We have already filed an additional affidavit. So you will get dispensation from convening meetings of shareholders and creditors. So it is very much possible. The third one, an order for convening of meetings of creditors and shareholders has been passed. Is there still a possibility seeking dispensation? Yes. In this case, you will have to file a miscellaneous application in the nature of an interlocutory application seeking modification of the earlier order. You can very well say that after this order was passed, I managed to get the consents from the shareholders, and to creditors, we will serve notices as this is not an arrangement between the creditors. So there have been orders by which it actually shows that you can always modify that, seek modification of the earlier order and ensure that meetings are not held. I have filed a merger application long time ago, but the same is not being listed for hearing. What should I do? See, in such a case, you need to make follow-ups with the assistant registrar, deputy registrar. You can send emails, and persistent follow-up will ensure that your application will be listed for hearing. Firstly, you need to find out if at all the same has any office objections, if it is under scrutiny, if it is under objections. If still it is not going forward, you will have to take it up on a continuous basis with the assistant or deputy registrar, and you will have to keep a track of the cause list which is coming out on a daily basis as to whether new matters are being taken up or not. Till 31st of July, we had this special bench. So all the new matters were coming up very expeditiously, say within 5 days, 7 days of after filing the application or petition. But then follow-ups were made for all of those. The ones which were not followed up actually landed up in trouble. They were not listed for a very long time. And then after the special bench has been taken away, now the benches are taking up only urgent matters. So it is a very difficult task to convince benches that why your matter is urgent. Earlier it was being listed straight away. Now you have to show an urgency as to what is the urgency. Why should we consider listing of your application? So any application you file or petition you file, it is our prerogative to have it numbered and have it listed for hearing as soon as possible, else it will remain as it is. There is a strong possibility of that. Is it mandatory to send notice to all the creditors? See, convening of meetings is not needed because under section 230 subsection 5, it is not an arrangement between the creditors, it is an arrangement between the shareholders. So NCLT says you send notices to all the creditors. Now there are companies which are having thousands of creditors. So if you have thousands of creditors and there may be small creditors of few thousand rupees and a few hundred rupees, so is it mandatory to send notices to all of them? So NCLT has come out and said that, see, you send notices to 95% of the creditors. So you decide you want to send notices to creditors having outstanding of more than 5 lakh rupees. So how much percentage are those creditors? So if we have an Excel sheet, if we have already determined, yes, if we send notices to 5 lakh and above, it will cover 96%. Then the bench says, okay, fine, no problem. Then 5 lakhs is fine. But in case the bench says, what about 10 lakhs? Then you say it will cover only 88%. Then the bench will say, no, you send to at least 95%. So in case of large companies, you need to decide the threshold as to whom to send notices. So accordingly, you can send notices to creditors having outstanding amount of that figure or higher. You can ignore the ones which are having lower outstanding balances. The next one is, the auditor appointed by official liquidator is asking for documents from the transferee company whether he is entitled to the same. The role of the official liquidator is very clear. The auditor has to scrutinize the books of accounts of the transferor company and file his report with the official liquidator, who in turn files his report with the NCLT. So the transferee company, he can only ask for the audited financial statements, memorandum and articles. Beyond that, he cannot go to scrutinize the books of accounts of the transferee company, because the audit is strictly for the transferor companies only. So if substantial documents are asked for, then the same need to be denied. The auditor appointed by the official liquidator has been prolonging his report on one pretext or the other. What should I do? A very common problem faced by professionals, that we have given all the data to the auditor, but he is not filing his report. What do I do? The thing is that once the communication is over, see, firstly, he will send you a checklist that we need these documents. Thereafter, you will send the necessary documents. The second email comes, please provide this further information. You provide that information. So after 3 or 4 rounds of communication, the communication stops, because whatever was required has been provided from your end. In case of inordinate delay, the official liquidator always says that you please bring such cases to our attention. You approach us. We will request that auditor that in the next 2 days, if the report is not submitted, we will proceed on the basis of the merits that the report is not forthcoming. So this has been a very effective tool. If you approach the official liquidator's office that the report is not coming, I have completed all my communication, I have given him all the documents and clarifications which was needed. So it has been 10 days since the last communication took place and the report is not coming. They are not taking calls, they are not answering. It is just not happening. So the OL office has been very effective, and they always encourage professionals to bring such cases to their attention, because they want to ensure that they file their report in a timely manner with the NCLT. So your direction will be the OL office. We need to speak out, and that will have an impact on the submission of the report. Can objections from the income tax department stop the merger, whether NOC from the income tax department is mandatory? no, the NOC from Income Tax Department is not mandatory. Once you give them a notice that we are undertaking this merger, they need to come out if they have any objections. As far as the objections are concerned, they need to be objections pertaining to the scheme. If their objections are something which do not part of the scheme, and if they are not able to display that how this merger would lead to a loss of revenue to the tax department, then the same will not be entertained by the NCLT. The NCLT will simply ask one question: how does your position get affected if this merger is sanctioned? They will say the tax demand is there on the transferor company. Now the company is getting merged. So the tribunal always says that the liability will be taken care of by the transferee company. So you need not worry at all. So, but if the scheme is designed in such a manner that it creates liabilities and there is an evasion of tax or stamp duty, and if the department manages to establish that, then it can be a difficult proposition for the merger to proceed. So the objections have to be merger specific and not company specific. The scheme of arrangement, the merger has to be challenged by the income tax department that it would result in loss of revenue, etc. Can I change the appointed date after filing the petition or application? Yes, by convening a shareholders meeting and filing a miscellaneous application in the nature of an interlocutory application before NCLT, the appointed date can be changed. How do I apply for certified copies of the final order? Any cost to be paid for the same? See, filing of certified true copy of the order, an email has to be sent to the registry of the NCLT presently during this pandemic, and it is in the form of a precipe. You have to file a precipe before NCLT. They will scan, they will print the order, which is uploaded on the website. They will certify it and mail you the scan, which can be used for filing with ROC. And what about the scheme? The scheme has to be sent separately by email by the authorized representative of the petitioner company. A cost of 5 rupees per page of the scheme has to be paid on Bharat Kosh, and the receipt of the same has to be annexed. Accordingly, they will print the scheme, they will stamp it and mail the scan to you. So you can file the scheme along with the order with the ROC. So the cost has to be paid at the rate of 5 rupees per page only for the scheme. The order is free of cost, one copy of the order. So on scan, you will get the order, no cost to be paid, only for the scheme, 5 rupees per page to be paid. What precaution should be taken while filing Form INC 28? So this INC 28 is a very crucial form. It contains a drop-down menu, a very dangerous drop-down menu. It contains so many sections. So we had a case in Mumbai NCLT whereby a company had come seeking revival. What had happened? They had filed INC 28 for amalgamation. They chose the wrong head. They chose others. So the form got approved. The status of the transferor company did not change in the master data. It remained active. And as the returns were not filed for 2 years, the ROC struck off the company and the directors were disqualified. So the company, instead of getting amalgamated, it got struck off. So they filed a petition under section 252 to revive the transferor company so that the status of that can change to amalgamated and the disqualification can be removed by filing a separate application to ROC that this was due to a wrong drop-down menu selection that this happened. So we need to ensure that we select the correct section in the form INC 28, which is very crucial. And there are a few dates which the system calculates, which are very essential to be taken into consideration. The first one is the date of passing the order. So it has to be the date when the order is passed. It cannot be the date when the certified true copy was issued. It has to be the date of the order which is printed, which is mentioned in the order, date of the order. It has to be that date. So that is the first date. Then there is a second column which says date of application of certified true copy. So it has to be the date of the order or 1 or 2 days after that. Because if you put a current date, then you are out of limitation as you need to apply for certified copy immediately after passing the order. So a delay in applying of certified copies will definitely run you out of limitation and lead to a case of condonation of delay, which is not warranted. So the date of application of certified true copy has to be a date which is 1 or 2 days after passing the order. And most of the certified true copies which are being given recently do not contain the date of application of certified true copy. It only contains the date when the certified copy was issued. So ROC does not have any objection, but then if you put a date which is very recent, then the due date will be a date which has already passed away, and upon filing of the form, it will ask you for condonation. And once a form goes into condonation, you have to go for condonation, and there is no other option for that. So if you choose a date of application of certified true copy which is near to the date of the order, then yes, you will get a very good date as a due date, which you will have sufficient time to file the order. Date of issue of certified true copy of the order will match with the date which is there in the certified copy. So two dates have to be matched. One is the date of the order, and the other one is the date of issue of certified copies. If you match these two dates properly, then you will be able to do a very successful INC 28 filing. And the drop down menu, you have to select section 230, 232. Any other option will create a lot of problems. The status of the transferor company will remain as active in the master data, and it will be struck off someday, and the directors would be disqualified. So again, you have to go back to NCLT. So INC 28 is very crucial. What can be the issues in approval of INC 28? So the issues can be pending SRNs in the transferor company or DPT3. Most of them are being approved now after 1 year and 2 months. So if you have an INC 28 which you have filed for amalgamation, it may not be approved if you have pending SRNs of the transferor company. The other issue is combination of authorized capital. So as I explained earlier, section 232(3)(I). So that section will definitely create problems, because ROC is now asking for difference in authorized share capital of which has already been paid, and in case you wish to actually increase the authorized capital for the transferee company now. So if there is a difference, you need to pay that, else they will not combine the authorized capital. So you may get approval of INC 28, but the capital may not be combined. So these are the various issues. Apart from that, the copy which has been attached needs to be legible. That needs to be ensured. The order plus scheme, the entire thing has to be attached properly. So the next one is, I could not file INC 28 on time. What do I do? So if you could not file INC 28 on time, the one thing you can do is to approach NCLT and by way of a miscellaneous application seeking enlargement of time. So this application can be filed quite easily, and it comes on board on priority since it is a interim application, and courts have been very liberal in granting you enlargement of time. Many people say that you have to approach the central government by filing form CG1, which is now being processed at MCA headquarters with a hefty filing fees and a lot of time for approval. So it is not necessary. You can go back to NCLT praying that there was a delay of so many months, and thereafter what you can do is you can file this application before NCLT and pray for enlargement of time, which is much more easier. So this can be completed. This will ensure that you get an order for enlargement of time. So yes. The last one is, after filing form INC 28, do I need to file any form for just 1 minute. Can you please scroll a bit up, Kamalji? No. That last line is not visible. Yeah. After filing form INC 28, do I need to file any form for transferor company? So in case of a transferor company, once you have filed INC 28, there is no need to file any other form, which we have indicated earlier, as the status will change to amalgamated very soon. Yes. So this is it. Thank you so much for the listening, and we can take up questions. Varsha, if
Yes,
you
sir.
have any questions.
Yes, sir. We have received very much of questions. So I'll take from the first question, sir. Uh, this is with regard to the calculation fees. So Manju Mundra is asking, but application fees is being charged as per each company.
Application fees. So
Yes.
this it suggested that see, application fees, if you have multiple companies, if you file a joint application, then only one fees has to be paid, that is 5,000 rupees, irrespective of the number of companies. So if it is a joint application, then only one fees of 5,000 has to be paid. But if you have separate applications, then 5,000 rupees for every company needs to be paid.
Okay. So
Yes.
the next question, this is with regard to the printing of the application or the petition. Presently,
Yes.
both side printing is allowed, I think so. Like I think
Supreme Court has started that, but unfortunately that has not percolated to NCLT till now. Maybe one day it will be percolated to NCLT as well. So presently single side printing on legal paper, that is the position now.
Okay. So the next one, auditor is appointed by OL or NCLT. In our case, by OL, official liquidator.
No, the letter is sent by official liquidator. The appointment takes by NCLT, and it is from that panel of chartered accountants. So the panel is of the official liquidator, and the list is supplied to the NCLT. So NCLT randomly picks out one name from that and inserts it in the order. Once the order is communicated to the official liquidator sends a communication to the company as well as the auditor saying that you have been appointed. So ultimately the appointment takes place by NCLT only, but it is from the panel of the list of chartered accountants of the official liquidator.
Okay. So the next question, any reference for maximum auditor's fees?
No, this is completely on practical lines. So there is no such reference, but there are several orders which say 2 lakh rupees. So it doesn't cross 2 lakh rupees.
Okay.
The next one.
Yes, sir. As per section 232 subsection 3 subsection 1 of Companies Act 2013, please explain and clarify whether difference amount is payable. Some companies paying the difference, institute should take up with the ministry.
Yes, companies have been directed to pay the difference by ROC Mumbai. ROC says you have to pay the difference, else the capital will not be combined, right? So that is the present position, and institute should take up with ministry that we cannot comment upon. So the present law is that ROC is insisting that you will have to pay the difference.
Okay. So the next one, can you please give this procedure for online application of certified true copy?
Yes, that gentleman can mail us. We have this email ID. We will send it across. There is a precipe or format of precipe which has to be sent to a particular email ID and certain in a certain language. So if that gentleman sends us a mail, we will be happy to provide the same.
Yes, sir. And we have received many requests for sharing the PPT.
Yes, so we have actually shared our email ID. Whosoever is interested in getting the PPT as well as the orders which we have showed, the entire thing we will zip it and mail it to them. They can send a request on this email ID of ours. We will ensure that it is shared with all today itself.
Yes, yes, sir. Among the participants, if anyone is willing to ask any question, can please unmute and ask as well. Any questions?
Varsha?
So I'm seeing that two have unmuted, but I'm not sure any questions are being asked.
Yeah, hello Ashish.
Yes, sir.
Arvind here. Thank you very much for sharing such a good, wonderful knowledge.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, we have one more question.
Yes.
Is it required to increase the share capital of the transferee company before going for merger application, or file INC 28 suffices for combining the share capital?
See, if the authorized capital is inadequate, then you can undertake that you will increase the authorized capital later. But if your authorized capital requirement is being taken care of by way of combination of authorized capital, then by way of INC 28, the authorized capital was being increased by the ROC automatically, but now section 232(3)(I) has come into the picture. So we need to actually ensure that we should have enough authorized capital so as to ensure allotment of shares post the amalgamation. Earlier, it was being clubbed automatically. Now it is not happening. So that is why.
Also, one more we have received. Is it necessary to file Form PAS3 for issuance of shares to the shareholders of the transferor company?
Yes, it is indeed necessary. You need to file pass 3. You need to issue share certificates. You need to pay stamp duty on that. You have to file pass 3. Accordingly, the new paid up capital will reflect in the master data of ROC.
Oh. Any further questions?
I think that is it, Varsha.
Yes, sir.
Can we
Yes,
end the presentation?
yes, sir. So thank you for this wonderful presentation, taking us through all the practical challenges faced by a professional in NCLT. I'm sure this presentation is going to be very, very, very useful to all the professionals pursuing their career at NCLT, sir.
Sure. Thank you very much and see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Please end the presentation.
Yeah.
Varsha.
Yeah.